The red dust storm gathered on the horizon like a giant beast, its crimson belly swelling with each passing minute. In the distance, the jagged ruins of ancient Karu civilization pierced the skystone monuments, defying time and the endless erosion of the desert winds. Elian Morrow pulled his protective mask tighter around his face as he descended deeper into the small tomb he had discovered beneath the shifting sands of Eridax. The planet Eridax was mostly known for two things: its unforgiving desert climate and the mysterious ruins of the once great Karu civilization that had vanished thousands of years ago. The region, known as Horsejaw, named for its distinctive rock formations, was particularly harsh, a place where even the most seasoned explorers hesitated to venture. But Elian was not like most explorers. "Just a bit deeper," he muttered to himself, squeezing his lean frame through a narrow passage that seemed to have been deliberately hidden by the original architects. His headlamp illuminated hieroglyphs and strange symbols etched into the sandstone walls. His heart raced with excitement. This could be the discovery that would etch his name into the annals of interplanetary archaeology forever. For years, Elian had been ridiculed by his colleagues for his obsession with the Karu. Many believed that everything worth discovering about the ancient civilization had already been found catalogued and dismissed as primitive compared to other fallen galactic empires. But Elian knew better. There were anomalies in the Karu records, inconsistencies that suggested a society far more advanced than previously thought. The passage opened into a small chamber, barely large enough for him to stand. Unlike the crude outer corridors, this room bore signs of sophisticated craftsmanship. The walls were lined with a strange metal that seemed to absorb his lamplight rather than reflect it. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and upon it rested what appeared to be a simple metal rod. "That's it. All this way for a stick." Elian frowned, disappointment washing over him. He had hoped for Scrolls technology, or at least some artifact that would validate his theories. Instead, he found what appeared to be a common staff, albeit made of an unfamiliar metal. The object was approximately 1 meter long, its surface covered with intricate engravings that seemed to shift and change as he examined them. Despite his disappointment, Elian's trained eye recognized that the craftsmanship was extraordinary. The metal didn't match any known alloy in his database. With a shrug, he reached out and grasped the rod. It felt strangely warm to the touch, almost alive. As he lifted it from the pedestal, the ground beneath him trembled slightly. "Time to go," he muttered suddenly, aware of how much time had passed. The dust storm would be upon him soon, and being trapped in these ruins would mean certain death. He stuffed the metal rod into his backpack, considering it might fetch a decent price from collectors, if nothing else. As Elian emerged from the tomb entrance, the sky had darkened to an ominous crimson. The storm was advancing faster than he had anticipated. He needed to reach his rover within the next 15 minutes, or he'd be caught in the open. That's when he saw them shadowy figures emerging from the swirling dust. At first, he thought they might be rock formations, but as they drew closer, he realized they were alive. Tall, imposing figures with rough, textured skin that resembled the sandstone of the ruins themselves. Their eyes were deep-set and glowed with an amber light that pierced through the dust. Karu warriors, living, breathing members of a civilization thought to be extinct. Elian froze. Everything he thought he knew about Eridax, about the Karu, was suddenly thrown into question. His mind raced with possibilities. Had they been living and hiding all this time? Were these descendants of the original civilization, or something else entirely? The warriors formed a semicircle around him, their posture neither overtly threatening nor welcoming. Elian raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm, but the gesture seemed to have no effect on the stoic figures. "I am Elian Morrow, an archaeologist," he called out over the howling wind. "I mean no disrespect to your sacred sites." The warriors remained motionless, their expressions unreadable behind ornate masks that covered the upper portions of their faces. The storm was closing in, and Elian knew he needed to make a decision, quickly attempt to flee to his rover, or try to communicate further with these beings. Instinctively, He reached into his backpack and pulled out the metal rod he had recovered. Perhaps returning their artifact would demonstrate his good intentions. The moment the rod became visible, the atmosphere changed dramatically. The warriors, previously motionless, suddenly dropped to one knee in perfect unison, their weapons an assortment of spears and crystalline blades raised in a defensive formation. It wasn't aggression, it was reverence, a battle stance reserved for royalty or deities. A whisper rippled through their ranks, carried on the wind, but somehow cutting through the storm's roar. "You returned." The words, spoken in perfect standard language, sent a chill down Elian's spine. He looked at the rod in his hand, then back at the kneeling warriors. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Elian said, his voice betraying his growing panic. "I didn't return. I just found this stick. It's a historical artifact, that's all." One of the warriors, taller than the rest and adorned with more elaborate armor, rose and approached Elian. The storm seemed to part around the warrior, as if even the elements respected their presence. "The Rod of Unity chooses its bearer," the warrior said, their voice deep and resonant. "It has been awaiting your return for millennia." Elian's mind raced. This was far beyond any archaeological discovery he had imagined. These weren't just survivors or descendants, they were an active, thriving society that had somehow remained hidden from galactic civilization. And now, through some bizarre misunderstanding, they believed he was someone significant. The storm was nearly upon them now, massive walls of red dust threatening to engulf everything in their path. Elian had seconds to decide: try to explain the mistake and flee to his rover, or follow these warriors and learn more about what they believed him to be. Science and curiosity won out over caution. "Where would you have me go?" Elian asked, raising his voice against the howling wind. The lead warrior extended a hand toward a formation of rocks that seemed to shimmer and fade, revealing a hidden passage previously invisible to the naked eye. "To Karua, the last city," the warrior replied. "The storm brings death to the surface, but life continues beneath." With one last look at the direction of his rover, now completely obscured by the dust, Elian made his choice. Clutching the mysterious rod tightly, he stepped forward, allowing himself to be guided into the hidden passage, just as the full fury of the storm engulfed the ruins above. The descent was long and winding, a spiraling path that seemed to penetrate deep into the planet's crust. Elian found himself surrounded by warriors, neither prisoners nor exactly guests. The passageway was lit by strange luminescent fungi that grew along the walls, casting an eerie blue glow that made the Karu warrior's skin appear almost iridescent. After what seemed like hours of descent, the passage opened up to reveal a sight that stole Elian's breath away. A vast underground cavern stretched before him, its ceiling so high it disappeared into darkness. But it was what filled the cavern that truly astounded him. A city, a living, breathing metropolis carved from stone and crystal. Spires and towers reached toward the unseen ceiling, connected by intricate bridges that spanned vast distances. Water flowed through aqueducts that wound through the city like arteries, feeding pools and gardens filled with plant life, unlike anything Elian had seen on the surface. Everything was illuminated by the same bioluminescent organisms that had lit their path, creating a perpetual twilight that was both haunting and beautiful. Karua, the last city of the Karu. As they entered the city proper, Karu citizens stopped and stared. They were diverse in appearance, some tall and lean, like the warriors, others stockier with skin that seemed to shimmer with crystalline deposits. All shared the same deep-set amber eyes that seemed to pierce through Elian, examining not just his physical form, but something deeper. The warriors led him to the center of the city, where a magnificent structure rose above all others, a temple or palace constructed from a material that seemed to shift between solid stone and liquid light. As they approached, a delegation emerged from the building's entrance. At the forefront was a female Karu, smaller than the warriors, but with an air of authority that commanded respect. Her skin was smoother than the others, with intricate patterns that seemed to be both natural and artificially enhanced. She wore robes of a material that flowed like water, but reflected light like polished metal. "I am Sarala, Keeper of Chronicles," she announced, her voice melodic yet formal. "The return of the Rod of Unity was foretold, though we did not expect its bearer to be—" She paused, studying Elian. "Quite like you." Elian stepped forward, still clutching the rod. "My name is Elian Morrow. I'm an archaeologist from Earth. There's been a misunderstanding. I didn't return with anything. I discovered this artifact in a tomb near the surface." Sarala's expression remained unreadable. "The rod chooses its bearer, not the other way around. It has been missing for 3,000 cycles, since the great schism that drove our people beneath the surface." She gestured toward the rod. "What you hold is not merely an artifact. It is the Rod of Unity, the supreme symbol of authority among the Karu people. Legend holds that it can only be wielded by one worthy of uniting our divided clans." Elian looked down at the metal rod with new eyes. What he had dismissed as a simple staff was apparently an object of immense cultural and possibly religious significance. He felt a weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders and a growing sense of alarm. "I appreciate the historical context," Elian said carefully, "but I'm an outsider. I have no claim to your cultural artifacts or authority. I'm happy to return the rod to its rightful place." As he extended the rod toward Sarala, a commotion erupted from behind the delegation. A group of Karu pushed forward, their posture, aggressive eyes blazing with anger. "Blasphemy!" one shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at Elian. "An outsider cannot possess the rod. The ancient laws demand his execution." Sarala raised a hand and the group fell silent, though their hostility remained palpable. "The traditionalist faction believes that only pure Karu blood can wield the rod," she explained to Elian. "Others among us, the reformists, believe that the rod chooses based on spirit, not heritage." Another Karu stepped forward, this one adorned with symbols of authority, different from Sarala's. "I am Sufar, Lord of the Stone Clan," he announced, his voice like gravel. "The rod has chosen, but our laws are clear. The bearer must prove worthy through the trial of unity." Murmurs swept through the gathering crowd. Elian could sense that he had unwittingly stepped into the center of a cultural and political conflict that had been brewing long before his arrival. "What exactly is the trial of unity?" he asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "Combat," Sufar replied simply. "To unify one must first demonstrate strength. You will face me in the stone arena when the dust tide recedes." Elian's heart sank. He was a scholar, not a warrior. Against a being like Sufar, who stood nearly 2 meters tall and looked as though he was carved from the bedrock itself, he wouldn't last 10 seconds. "Surely there's another way," he protested. "I have no desire to challenge anyone's authority." "The law is the law," Sufar intoned. "Either face the trial or surrender the rod and accept the punishment for trespassing in our sacred tombs." Before Elian could respond, Sarala interjected. "The honored guest will need time to prepare. He will stay in the scholars' quarter until the dust tide passes." Sufar seemed about to object, but finally gave a curt nod. 3 cycles, then we meet in the arena." As the crowd dispersed, Elian found himself being led away by Sarala and a small contingent of what appeared to be scholars rather than warriors. His mind reeled with the implications of what had just transpired. In the span of a few hours, he had gone from a routine archaeological expedition to being thrust into the center of an alien society's power struggle, with his life hanging in the balance. Once they were alone in the scholars' quarter, a series of chambers filled with scrolls, crystals, and strange devices that Elian could only assume were some form of record-keeping technology. Sarala's formal demeanor softened slightly. "You truly do not know what you've become entangled in, do you?" she asked, studying his face. Elian placed the rod carefully on a table between them. "I'm an archaeologist. I study dead civilizations, artifacts, ruins. I don't get involved in living politics." "Yet, here you are," Sarala replied, holding the most powerful symbol of Karu authority, and facing a trial by combat with our most formidable clan lord. She moved to a crystalline structure that dominated one wall of the chamber. With a touch, it illuminated, revealing intricate, holographic images that shifted and flowed. Elian recognized them as historical records, a visual chronicle of the Karu civilization. 3,000 cycles ago, Sirala began. The Karu ruled not just beneath the surface, but above it as well. Eridax was not always a desert. Our ancestors built a civilization that spanned the planet, unified under the guidance of the Rod and its chosen bearer. The images shifted, showing a thriving society, with cities that dwarfed even Karua in scale and beauty. Then came the cataclysm. She continued, and the images darkened, showing devastation on a planetary scale. Some say it was a natural disaster, the convergence of our three suns that scorched the surface. Others believe it was warfare or punishment from the gods. Regardless, our people were forced beneath the surface, and in the chaos, unity was lost. The hologram showed the Karu separating into distinct clans, each claiming different regions of the underground world. The Rod of Unity disappeared during this time. Without it, no leader could claim legitimate authority over all clans. We fragmented, fought amongst ourselves, nearly destroyed what remained of our civilization. Elian watched, transfixed, as the history of a people thought extinct by the wider galaxy played out before him. "And now the Rod has reappeared," he said quietly. "With me." Sirala nodded. "The traditionalists believe the Rod should only be wielded by one of pure Karu lineage. They see your possession of it as sacrilege. The reformists, like myself, believe the Rod's choice transcends bloodlines, that it seeks qualities in its bearer that go beyond heritage." "What do you believe?" Elian asked. Sirala was quiet for a moment. "I believe the Rod has chosen for a reason. Whether that choice is wise remains to be seen." She touched the holographic display again, and it shifted to show various Karu wielding what appeared to be the same Rod that now sat on the table. Each figure used it differently, some as a weapon, others as a tool of healing or construction. "The Rod is more than a symbol," she explained. "In the right hands it is said to amplify the bearer's natural abilities, to channel the very essence of what makes them unique." Elian's scientific mind immediately began considering possibilities. A technology so advanced it could interact with its user's biological or psychological makeup. Or was this simply mythology built around an object of cultural significance? "I'm not a warrior," Elian admitted. "If this trial of unity requires combat, I don't see how I can possibly survive, let alone win." Sirala's amber eyes seemed to glow more intensely. "The trial is not merely about physical prowess. It is about demonstrating worthiness to lead. Throughout our history, many rod-bearers have won not through force, but through wisdom." She gestured toward the rod. "It chose you for a reason, Elian Morrow. Perhaps it's time you discovered what that reason might be." With that cryptic statement, she left him alone with his thoughts and the weight of an alien civilization's expectations on his shoulders. For the next 3 cycles, each equivalent to roughly 20 Earth hours, Elian divided his time between studying Karu history through Sirala's records and examining the Rod of Unity itself. The more he learned, the more fascinated he became with both. The Rod defied his attempts at scientific analysis. It seemed to be made of a metal unknown to galactic metallurgy, and the engravings that covered its surface appeared to shift subtly when not being directly observed. More strangely still, it maintained a constant temperature slightly above that of its environment, regardless of external conditions. From Sirala's historical records, Elian learned that the Karu civilization had once been far more advanced than anyone in the archaeological community had suspected. They had harnessed energies beyond current galactic understanding, built cities that responded to the thoughts of their inhabitants, and explored realms of science that bordered on what humans might consider mysticism. But most importantly, he learned about the Rod of Unity and the role it had played in Karu governance. It was not merely a scepter or ceremonial object. It was the physical manifestation of the Karu concept of leadership. Those chosen by the rod did not rule through decree, but through a form of consensus building unique to Karu culture. The rod supposedly amplified this ability, allowing the bearer to sense the needs and desires of those they led. Yet for all this knowledge, Elian was no closer to understanding why the rod had chosen him, or how he could possibly face Sufar in combat and survive. On the morning of the third cycle, as he was contemplating his likely defeat, Sirala entered his chambers, accompanied by several other Karu scholars. "It is time," she announced. "The dust tide has receded and the stone arena awaits." As Elian reluctantly picked up the rod, one of the scholars older than the others, with skin so textured it resembled the ancient ruins themselves, spoke up. "Remember, outsider," the elder said, using the term not as an insult, but as a simple description. "The trial of unity is not about destroying your opponent. It is about proving your worth to unify." Elian nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what that meant in practical terms. How does one prove worth against an opponent twice your size wielding a battle axe? The journey to the stone arena took them through parts of Karua that Elian hadn't yet seen. Unlike the scholarly and administrative areas he had been confined to, these were clearly military and industrial sectors. Karu workers shaped stone and crystal, with tools that seemed to manipulate matter on a molecular level. Warriors trained in vast chambers, their movements fluid, yet powerful, like water flowing over and through stone. Finally, they emerged into the arena itself, a massive circular space, carved directly from the bedrock, with terraced seating that rose hundreds of meters on all sides. Unlike the rest of Karua, the arena featured an open ceiling that revealed a shaft extending all the way to the surface. Sunlight filtered down, creating a spotlight effect in the center of the combat area. The stands were filled with thousands of Karu from all clans, their skin tones ranging from the pale gray of those who rarely left the deepest levels to the ruddy bronze of surface scouts. Their collective presence created a low, thrumming energy that Elian could feel in his bones. At the far end of the arena stood Sufar, Lord of the Stone Clan. He was even more imposing than Elian remembered, nearly 2.5 meters tall, with muscular limbs that looked capable of crushing stone. In his hands, he held an enormous battle axe, its edge gleaming in the filtered sunlight. As Elian walked to the center of the arena, rod in hand, the crowd fell silent. He could feel thousands of amber eyes upon him, judging, evaluating, many hoping for his defeat. Sufar approached each step, leaving small indentations in the stone floor. Up close, Elian could see that the clan lord's skin was embedded with what appeared to be actual crystals, a natural armor that would make him even more formidable in combat. The Trial of Unity. Sufar announced, his voice echoing throughout the arena, "Is as old as the Karu themselves. Through it we determine who is worthy to wield the rod of unity and guide our people." He raised his battle axe, pointing it directly at Elian. "This outsider claims no right to the rod, yet the rod has chosen him. Today, we will see if that choice was wisdom or folly." From a raised platform at the edge of the arena, a Karu official struck a crystalline gong, its resonance filling the vast space. The trial had begun. Sufar wasted no time. With a speed that belied his size, he charged forward, battle axe raised high. Elian, acting purely on instinct, dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the weapon, as it crashed into the stone floor where he had been standing just moments before. The impact sent shards of stone flying in all directions and left a crater in the arena floor. The crowd roared its approval clearly. Most were supporting their clan lord. Elian scrambled to his feet, gripping the rod tightly. He had no combat training, no strategy beyond simple survival. His mind raced, trying to recall everything he had learned about the rod and the trial. "The trial is not about destroying your opponent," the elder scholar had said. "It is about proving your worth to unify." But how? How does one prove worth while avoiding being cleaved in two by a battle axe? Sufar had already recovered from his initial attack and was circling slowly, evaluating his opponent. "Is this all the rod's chosen can offer?" he taunted. Evasion fear. Elian's scientific mind kicked into overdrive. If he couldn't win through combat, perhaps he could win through understanding. The rod was warm in his hand, almost pulsing with energy. "I don't want to fight you, Sufar," Elian called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "The rod chose me, but I don't claim authority over your people. I only seek to understand." "Understanding comes through combat," Sufar replied, launching another attack. This time, as Elian raised the rod instinctively to block the blow he knew would kill him, something extraordinary happened. The rod pulsed with energy, and a field of force emanated from it, stopping the battle axe mid-swing. A collective gasp rose from the audience. Even Sufar seemed shocked, taking a step back, as his weapon was repelled, not by physical strength, but by something else entirely. The rod was glowing now, the engravings on its surface shifting more rapidly than ever before. Elian felt a strange connection forming, not just to the object in his hands, but to everything around him. He could sense the arena, the stone beneath his feet, the thousands of Karoo watching, even Sufar himself. And in that moment of connection, Elian saw something that changed everything. On Sufar's forearm, partially hidden by his armor, was a birthmark, or perhaps a tattoo, in the exact pattern of one of the engravings on the rod. The realization hit Elian like a physical blow. The rod wasn't just choosing him, it was revealing a connection to Sufar as well. A connection that went beyond combat, beyond the trial. "Your arm," Elian said, pointing with the rod. "The marking, it matches the rod." Sufar froze, his battle axe lowering slightly. "Impossible. Those markings are from the lineage of the last unifier lost 3,000 cycles ago." "Look," Elian insisted, stepping forward and holding the rod next to Sufar's arm. The engraving on the rod and the marking on Sufar's skin pulsed in unison, both glowing with the same inner light. The arena had fallen completely silent. Elian could feel the collective shock of the audience, the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Sufar stared at the matching patterns, his expression a complex mixture of disbelief, reverence, and something deeper, a recognition that transcended cultural barriers. Slowly, deliberately, the clan lord lowered his battle axe completely, and then, in a move that sent shockwaves through the arena, knelt before Elian. "The Chosen One has returned," Sufar announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space. "The blood of the last unifier flows through him, hidden but revealed by the rod." Elian was about to protest. He was human, not Karoo, and certainly not descended from their ancient leaders. But before he could speak, Sirala stepped into the arena, her expression one of awe and revelation. "The prophecy spoke not of blood, but of spirit," she called out. The last unifier promised to return not in form, but in essence one who would bridge divides, who would see connections where others saw only differences. She approached Elian and Sufar, her gaze moving between them. "The rod has chosen, and in doing so it has revealed the truth that has been hidden from us for millennia. Unity comes not from conquest, but from recognition of shared purpose." The crowd's silence had transformed into a low murmur that grew steadily louder. Elian could sense confusion, uncertainty, but also from some quarters hope. The trial of unity had not ended as anyone expected, least of all himself. Sufar rose to his feet, towering over Elian once more, but his posture was no longer threatening. He extended his hand palm, up a gesture of respect among the Karoo. "The trial is complete," he declared, "not through combat, but through revelation." Elian, still trying to process everything that had happened, placed his hand in Sufar's massive palm. The connection he had felt through the rod intensified, not a takeover of will, but a sharing of understanding. He could sense Sufar's initial skepticism giving way to a grudging respect, and beneath that, a genuine desire for the unity that had been lost for so long. As their hands touched the rod of unity, flared with brilliant light, illuminating the entire arena. The engravings stopped shifting and settled into a new pattern, one that somehow incorporated elements from all the Karu clans represented in the audience. The crowd erupted in a mixture of reactions. Many cheered, others protested, and some simply stared in stunned silence. The traditionalists were on their feet shouting objections that were drowned out by the growing roar of approval from the reformists. In the midst of this chaos, Sarala stepped forward again, raising her hands for silence. Gradually, the tumult subsided. "The Council of Clans must convene," she announced. "What we have witnessed today changes everything. The trial has revealed a truth we have ignored for too long." With that declaration, the formal proceedings came to an abrupt end. Elian found himself being ushered out of the arena by Sarala and a contingent of scholars and moderate clan representatives. Sufar surprisingly joined them, keeping pace alongside Elian as they moved through passageways that led to the central administrative complex of Karua. "You do not have Karu blood," Sufar said quietly, as they walked, his tone more curious than accusatory. "Yet the rod responded to you as it would to a true unifier." "I don't understand it myself," Elian admitted. "I'm an archaeologist. I came here to study your history, not to become part of it." Sufar made a sound that might have been a laugh. "History and present are not so easily separated, Elian Maro. The rod has always known this. Perhaps that is why it chose you, someone who looks backward to move forward." The council chamber was a vast, circular room, dominated by a table of the same shifting stone-light material that comprised much of Karua's most significant architecture. Around it sat representatives from each of the major Karu clans, their distinctive physical characteristics marking their different evolutionary paths during the long centuries underground. The debate that ensued was heated and complex, conducted partly in standard language for Elian's benefit, and partly in the more nuanced Karu tongue that even his advanced translator struggled to fully capture. The core of the argument was clear. However, what to do about an outsider who had been chosen by their most sacred artifact of governance? The traditionalists argued that the trial had been corrupted, that Sufar had been bewitched or otherwise compromised. They demanded that Elian be stripped of the rod and either executed or banished back to the surface. The reformists countered that the rod's choice must be respected, that it had always selected bearers based on qualities that transcended simple heritage. They pointed to historical records of the rod, choosing unexpected leaders during times of great change and crisis. Throughout the debate, Elian remained silent, studying the faces and body language of the clan representatives. His years of interpreting dead civilizations from fragmentary evidence had given him a unique ability to read living cultures as well. He could see the fault lines in Karu society, the deep divisions that went beyond politics into fundamentally different visions of what their civilization should be. Finally, when the argument seemed to be reaching a stalemate, Sarala called for silence. "Let us hear from the rod-bearer himself," she suggested, turning to Elian. "What does the outsider who has been chosen say about his role among us?" All eyes turned to Elian. He could feel the weight of their gaze, the expectations and fears that accompanied it. He stood slowly, the rod of unity held loosely in his hand. "I am not your leader," he began, his voice steady, despite his inner turmoil. "I didn't come to Aradak seeking power or authority. I came seeking knowledge, understanding of a civilization I believed was lost to time." He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from each clan. "What I found instead was something far more valuable, a living culture, with its own struggles, its own path forward. The rod chose me, yes, but I believe it did so, not to place me above you, but to serve as a bridge between your past and your future." Elian placed the rod on the table, where it continued to pulse with gentle light. "I won't claim authority I haven't earned and don't want. But neither will I abandon the responsibility that has been placed upon me. I propose a different path forward, one where the rod serves its original purpose, to unify, rather than to rule. He turned to Sarala. You told me the rod was meant to amplify the bearer's natural abilities. I am a scholar, an interpreter of history. Perhaps that's what it saw in me, someone who could help the Karoo reconnect with their past to build a stronger future. The chamber was silent as his words sank in. It was Sufar who finally broke the stillness, rising to his impressive height. The outsider speaks with wisdom. He rumbled, surprising many around the table. For too long we have used the rod as a weapon of dominance, a tool to elevate one clan above others. Maybe its purpose was always different, to remind us of what we once were and what we could be again. Sarala stepped forward, placing her hand near the rod without touching it. There is precedent for this interpretation in our oldest records. The first bearers of the rod were not warriors, but mediators chosen for their ability to hear all voices and find the common ground between them. Slowly, a new consensus began to form in the chamber. Not unanimity, the traditionalists still grumbled their objections, but a growing majority saw the wisdom in a new approach. The rod of unity would not crown a new absolute ruler, but would instead serve as the centerpiece of a revitalized council of clans, with Elian serving not as leader, but as mediator and cultural interpreter. As the council session drew to a close, formal proposals were made and approved. Elian would remain in Karoo as an honored guest, working alongside Sarala to document and interpret Karoo history and culture. The rod would be housed in a newly constructed chamber at the heart of the city, accessible to representatives from all clans, but belonging to none exclusively. Most surprisingly of all, Sufar himself proposed opening limited contact with the wider galactic community. We have hidden long enough, he declared. If one outsider can bring such change, perhaps it is time we reconsidered our isolation. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. News of the council's decisions spread throughout Karoo and to the other hidden Karoo settlements scattered beneath the surface of Eridax. Some celebrated, others protested, but the general mood was one of cautious optimism, a sense that something long stagnant was finally beginning to flow again. Elian found himself at the center of it all, working tirelessly with Sarala to establish what would eventually become the Karoo Interplanetary Archaeological Institute. The institute would serve dual purposes, preserving and interpreting Karoo history and culture for future generations of their own people, and carefully introducing selected aspects of that heritage to the wider galactic community. Sufar, somewhat to Elian's surprise, became one of his strongest allies. The clan lord's initial skepticism had been replaced by a genuine respect, and his influence among the more traditional elements of Karoo society proved invaluable in easing tensions and building broader support for the changes taking place. 3 months after his accidental discovery of the rod, Elian stood on a balcony overlooking the central plaza of Karoo. Below, Karoo from all clans gathered for the ceremony of new unity, a revival of an ancient festival that hadn't been celebrated since before the cataclysm. The Rod of Unity had been installed in its new chamber that morning, surrounded by historical exhibits and educational materials that Elian and Sarala had prepared together. "Did you ever imagine your expedition would end like this?" Sarala asked, joining him at the balcony rail. Elian smiled, shaking his head. "Never. I came looking for artifacts and ruins. Instead, I found a living civilization and a new purpose." The rod chose wisely. Sarala said, her amber eyes reflecting the bioluminescent lights that illuminated the celebration below. "It saw in you what many of us could not: the ability to see connections between past and future, between different cultures and ways of thinking." "I'm still not convinced the rod has any special powers," Elian admitted. "It could simply be an advanced technology that responds to neural patterns, or perhaps even a sophisticated AI designed to select leaders based on psychological profiles." Sarala made the clicking sound that Elian had come to recognize as Karoo laughter. "Always the scientist. Is it so difficult to accept that some things might exist beyond your current understanding? That's just it, Elian replied, gesturing toward the celebration below. I don't need to fully understand something to appreciate its value or respect its impact. That's the lesson I've learned here. Their conversation was interrupted as Sufar joined them on the balcony, his massive form casting long shadows in the dim light. Despite his intimidating physical presence, the clan lord had shown unexpected depth during their weeks of collaboration, a philosophical mind hidden beneath the warrior exterior. The traditionalists have agreed to send representatives to the Institute, Sufar announced without preamble. Not enthusiastically, but they will participate. That's significant progress, Elian noted. Just 3 months ago they were calling for my execution. 3 months ago they had never seen the rod in action, Sufar replied. Even the most stubborn stone can be shaped by persistent water. Below them, the celebration was reaching its apex. Karoo from all clans were participating in ritual dances that hadn't been performed together in millennia. The divisions between them, visible in their different physical adaptations and cultural expressions, seemed less pronounced in the shared joy of the moment. There is still much work to be done, Sirala said, her tone reflective. Centuries of separation and suspicion cannot be undone in a few months. But it's a beginning, Elian said. Sometimes that's the most important part, taking the first step towards something new. As they watched the celebration unfold, Elian reflected on the strange journey that had brought him to this moment. What had begun as a routine archaeological expedition had transformed into something far more profound, a bridge between worlds, between past and present. The Rod of Unity, housed now in its ceremonial chamber below, continued to be an enigma. Its technology, if indeed it was technology, and not something else entirely, defied analysis. But its impact was undeniable. It had changed the course of a civilization, and in the process had changed Elian himself. 2 years passed with remarkable speed. The Karoo Interplanetary Archaeological Institute grew from a concept into a thriving reality, with facilities both in the underground city of Karua and more recently in a small but growing surface settlement near the excavation site where Elian had first discovered the Rod of Unity. Carefully managed delegations from the wider galactic community had begun to visit scholars, diplomats, and cultural exchange representatives. Each was thoroughly vetted and monitored with strict protocols in place to protect Karoo sovereignty and cultural integrity. The days of complete isolation were over, but the transition was being managed with deliberate caution. Elian's role had evolved as well. From initial mediator and cultural interpreter, he had become something of an ambassador, representing Karoo interests to outsiders, while helping the Karoo themselves navigate the complexities of interplanetary relations. It was a responsibility he had never sought, but had grown to embrace. On this particular day, Elian stood at the entrance to the recently completed surface observatory. The structure was a marvel of combined technologies, Karoo architectural principles, married with modern galactic engineering. Its massive telescopes were designed not to look outward to the stars, but inward to the planet itself, mapping the vast network of underground caverns and settlements that comprised the true extent of Karoo civilization. "Quite a change from the ruins you first explored," came a voice from behind him. Elian turned to see Dr. Amelia Venturi, an exoanthropologist from the Galactic Science Academy, who had become a regular visitor to Eridax. Her research on the cultural evolution of the Karoo had gained significant attention in academic circles, though Elian knew she was careful to publish only what the Karoo Council approved for wider dissemination. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it myself," Elian admitted. "When I first landed on this planet, I thought I was studying a dead civilization. Instead, I found one in the process of rebirth." Dr. Venturi nodded her eyes, scanning the horizon where the domes and spires of the new settlement rose from the red desert. "They're adapting remarkably well to renewed surface presence. The environmental engineering they've implemented is decades ahead of standard terraforming protocols." The Karoo never completely abandoned their surface technologies, Elian explained. They just redirected them. The same principles that allowed them to survive underground are now helping them reclaim small portions of the surface. They walked together through the observatory toward the central monitoring station, where a team of Karoo scientists worked alongside a handful of galactic researchers. The collaboration was still new, still fragile in many ways, but growing stronger with each successful project. Sirala was there overseeing the calibration of a particularly sensitive scanning array. Over the past 2 years, she had become not just Elian's closest ally among the Karoo, but a genuine friend. Her position as both Keeper of Chronicles and now Director of External Relations gave her significant influence in shaping Karoo policy toward the wider galaxy. "The deep cavern mapping is complete," she announced as Elian and Dr. Venturi approached. "We've confirmed the existence of 17 previously unknown settlement clusters in the southern hemisphere." "That's remarkable," Dr. Venturi said, studying the three-dimensional map that hovered above the central console. "The extent of subterranean development is far greater than we hypothesized." "We are a persistent people," Sirala replied, with a hint of pride. "When the surface became uninhabitable, we adapted rather than perished." The conversation turned technical, as Sirala explained the data collection methodology to Dr. Venturi. Elian used the opportunity to step away and check on another project that had become increasingly important to him: the restoration and digitization of ancient Karoo records that predated the cataclysm. In a quieter section of the observatory, a team led by one of Sirala's former students was carefully scanning fragile crystal tablets recovered from a deeply buried archive. The tablets contained accounts of Karoo life before they were forced underground, stories of cities that sprawled across verdant plains, of agricultural systems that worked in harmony with the planet's original ecosystem, of a society that had achieved a balance between technological advancement and environmental stewardship. "Any new discoveries?" Elian asked, approaching the lead researcher, a young Karoo named Talon. "Several," Talon replied, his enthusiasm evident. "We've found references to satellite settlements on Eridax's moons, and possibly even early interplanetary exploration. The pre-cataclysm Karoo may have visited neighboring systems." The implications were significant. If the ancient Karoo had indeed achieved spaceflight before their civilization was forced underground, it would rewrite galactic understanding of technological development in this sector. More importantly, for the Karoo themselves, it would provide a historical foundation for their re-emergence onto the galactic stage, not as newcomers, but as returning pioneers. As Elian examined the translated texts, a commotion from the main chamber drew his attention. Returning to the central area, he found Sufar had arrived accompanied by several members of the Council of Clans. Their presence was unexpected. The clan leaders rarely visited the surface facilities together. "What's happening?" Elian asked Sirala, who seemed equally surprised by the delegation's arrival. "I'm not certain," she replied, moving to greet the council members. They were scheduled to be in session discussing the new trade proposals. Sufar approached them, his expression grave. In the 2 years since the Trial of Unity, the clan lord had moderated many of his more traditional views, becoming an important advocate for careful, measured change. But now, something had clearly disturbed him. "We have detected unauthorized excavation at the sacred tombs," he announced without preamble. "Someone is attempting to access the chamber where the rod was found." Elian felt a chill. The location of his original discovery had been kept deliberately restricted, with access limited to a small number of approved researchers. Any unauthorized activity there could potentially damage irreplaceable archaeological resources, or worse, uncover dangerous technologies that the ancient Karoo had intentionally sealed away. "Do we know who?" Elian asked. "Not with certainty," one of the council members replied. "But the sensors detected energy signatures consistent with high-grade mining equipment, not archaeological tools." The implication was clear. Someone was looking for something specific, and they weren't concerned with preservation or protocol. I'll go immediately, Elian said. I know the site better than anyone, and I can assess the damage. Not alone, Sufar declared. I will accompany you along with a security detail. Sirala stepped forward. I should come as well. If they're seeking artifacts similar to the rod, my historical knowledge could be crucial. The council members exchanged glances, then nodded their agreement. Within the hour, a small expedition was assembled and boarding one of the Karu's ground transports vehicles that resembled massive scarabs, capable of traversing the harsh desert terrain with remarkable efficiency. As they journeyed toward the sacred tombs, Elian's mind raced with possibilities. Who would risk violating Karu's sovereignty to access the tomb, treasure hunters' corporate interests, seeking advanced technology, or someone with more specific knowledge about what might be hidden there? The journey took several hours, even with the advanced transport. The sacred tombs were located in one of the most remote regions of the Horsejaw, deliberately isolated from major settlements, even in ancient times. The red dust storm season had passed, but the air was still thick with suspended particles that created a perpetual crimson haze on the horizon. When they finally arrived at the coordinates, the evidence of intrusion was unmistakable. The carefully preserved entrance that Elian had documented years earlier was now surrounded by heavy equipment industrial mining gear, bearing the logo of Galactic Resource Enterprises, one of the largest extraction corporations in the sector. This is a direct violation of the Eridax Protection Treaty, Dr. Venturi said, examining the equipment with growing anger. She had joined their expedition at the last minute, citing her diplomatic credentials as potentially useful. GRE is a signatory to the non-interference agreements. Treaties mean little when profit is at stake. Sufar growled, his hand resting on the ceremonial weapon he still carried, despite his more diplomatic role in recent years. Elian approached the tomb entrance cautiously. The original narrow passage he had squeezed through had been widened considerably, the ancient stonework damaged by crude cutting tools. It was archaeological desecration of the worst kind, hasty, destructive, and irreverent. They're still inside, Sirala noted, pointing to power lines that ran from a portable generator into the darkness of the tomb. And they've been here for some time. Sufar signaled to his security team, who moved with practiced efficiency to secure the area and prepare for a potential confrontation. Despite their formidable appearance, Elian knew they had strict orders to avoid violence if possible. The last thing the emerging Karu wanted was an interplanetary incident. We should announce ourselves, Dr. Venturi suggested. Make it clear that they're in violation of multiple treaties and give them a chance to withdraw peacefully. Before anyone could respond, a figure emerged from the tomb entrance, a human man in expensive protective gear, followed by 2 armed security personnel. He squinted against the harsh desert light, then froze as he saw the assembled Karu warriors. "What the hell?" he muttered, reaching for a communication device at his belt. Elian stepped forward, deliberately placing himself between the intruders and the Karu security team. "My name is Elian Morrow, Cultural Liaison to the Karu Sovereign Council. You are conducting illegal excavation on protected territory in violation of the Eridax Protection Treaty." The man's surprise gave way to a calculating expression. "Morrow, the archaeologist who disappeared 2 years ago. Well, this is unexpected. Your activities here are unauthorized and destructive." Elian continued, ignoring the man's remarks. "Identify yourself and your purpose immediately." "Vance Merrick, Special Projects Director for GRE," the man replied with forced casualness. "We're conducting a standard resource survey with full corporate authorization." "You have no authorization from the Karu government," Sirala interjected, her normally melodic voice sharp with anger. "And this site is a sacred historical location, not a mining prospect." Merrick's eyes narrowed as he studied the assembled group. The official galactic position until recently was that the Karu were extinct. "Our company has valid extraction rights for this entire region, granted by the Sector Development Authority. Those rights were revoked when the Karu were recognized as the sovereign inhabitants of Eridax. Dr. Venturi said, stepping forward with a datapad displaying the relevant legal documents. Your presence here is a criminal act under interplanetary law. Tension filled the air as Merrick's security personnel shifted their stance hands, moving closer to their weapons. Sufar's warriors responded in kind, their own weaponry, a combination of traditional Karu design and more modern adaptations at the ready. "What exactly are you looking for, Merrick?" Elian asked, trying to defuse the situation. "This site has been thoroughly documented. There are no valuable minerals here." Something in Merrick's expression changed, a flash of knowledge that confirmed Elian's growing suspicion. This wasn't a random resource grab. The GRE director knew exactly what he was looking for. "The preliminary scans showed unusual energy readings," Merrick said carefully, "consistent with rare elements that could have significant industrial applications." "You're lying," Sirala stated flatly. "This tomb contains ceremonial artifacts, not industrial materials." Merrick's facade of corporate professionalism slipped slightly. "Is that what you told them, Morrow? That you found nothing but ceremonial trinkets? Not the rod that controls Karu technology? Not the keys to power sources that could revolutionize energy production across the galaxy?" The revelation hit Elian like a physical blow. Someone had leaked information about the Rod of Unity, not just its existence, but theories about its technological significance. And GRE believed there were more such artifacts to be found. "The Rod is not what you think it is," Elian said carefully. "It's not a weapon or a power source to be exploited." Save the academic caution for your journals," Merrick snapped. "We've analyzed the energy signatures from your published photographs. Whatever its original purpose, the technology inside that ceremonial artifact could be worth billions if properly developed." Sufar had heard enough. He stepped forward, his massive form towering over Merrick. "You will leave this sacred place immediately. Take your machines and go. This is your only warning." For a tense moment, it seemed Merrick might order his security team to resist. But even corporate greed had its limits when faced with the imposing reality of Karu warriors on their home territory. "This isn't over," Merrick said, gesturing for his team to stand down. "GRE has invested too much to walk away. If not here, we'll find other sites. The ancient Karu left their technology scattered across this planet." "And the living Karu will protect it," Sirala replied, "as is our right." Under the watchful eyes of Sufar's security team, Merrick and his personnel began dismantling their equipment. It would take them hours to pack everything, and Elian knew the confrontation was far from resolved. GRE was just one corporation among many that would be interested in exploiting Karu technology if they believed it could be weaponized or commercialized. As the corporate team worked, Elian, Sirala and Dr. Venturi entered the tomb to assess the damage. The destruction was extensive. Walls had been cored for samples, ancient inscriptions defaced by careless drilling, and several smaller artifacts simply taken. They were searching methodically, Dr. Venturi observed, studying the pattern of excavation. "Working outward from where you found the rod." "Looking for more like it," Elian agreed, anger rising as he surveyed the desecration. "But they don't understand what they're dealing with. The rod isn't just technology. It's integrated with Karu biology, psychology, cultural memory. That's why it responds differently to different bearers." Sirala was examining a section of wall that had been partially exposed by the GRE excavation. "They may have failed in their primary objective, but they've inadvertently revealed something significant." Elian and Dr. Venturi joined her, studying the newly exposed surface. Beneath layers of accumulated mineral deposits were inscriptions more elaborate than any Elian had documented in his original exploration. They appeared to be schematics, or diagrams depicting what could only be described as a network lines connecting various locations across what appeared to be a map of Eridax. "A distribution system," Elian murmured, tracing the patterns with his finger. "The rod wasn't unique. It was part of a network of similar devices positioned at key locations around the planet." The Unity Network. Sirala, breathed recognition dawning in her amber eyes. It's mentioned in our oldest legends, a system that connected all Karu, allowing instantaneous communication and resource sharing across the planet. It was believed destroyed during the cataclysm. Dr. Venturi was scanning the inscriptions with her datapad. If I'm interpreting these coordinates correctly, there could be dozens of nodes across Eridax, most likely in locations that would now be deep underground or in otherwise inaccessible regions. Which explains GRE's interest, Elian said grimly. If they found references to this network in my published research and believed the nodes contain the same technology as the rod, they'd see it as a potential gold mine. Their discovery added a new urgency to the situation. It wasn't just about protecting one sacred site anymore. It was about securing potentially dozens of locations across the planet before GRE or other corporate interests could locate them. As they emerged from the tomb, they found Sufar engaged in tense conversation with several of his warriors. The clan lord's expression was grim as he approached them. 3 more unauthorized excavations have been detected, he reported, all in regions corresponding to ancient settlements. This was not an isolated incident. It was a coordinated effort. Elian shared what they had discovered about the Unity Network, watching comprehension dawn on Sufar's weathered features. Then we must act quickly, the clan lord declared. The council must be informed and protection details dispatched to all known ancient sites. That won't be enough, Dr. Venturi cautioned. If GRE has identified potential locations from satellite imagery or other data sources, they could have teams en route to dozens of sites already. And they're just one corporation. Once word spreads, others will follow. Elian looked out across the red desert, thinking of the hidden network that had once connected an entire civilization. Technology so advanced it had been mistaken for mysticism, now at risk of being exploited or destroyed by those who could never truly understand its purpose. We need a more comprehensive solution, he said finally. One that addresses the root of the problem. Which is? Sarella asked. Ignorance, Elian replied. Both theirs and ours. We've been approaching this all wrong, treating Karu technology as either sacred relics to be preserved untouched or as potential weapons to be secured. But what if there's a third option? He turned to face the others, an idea forming that was radical, yet rooted in everything he had learned during his years among the Karu. What if we reactivate the Unity Network ourselves? Not as it was originally designed, that would be impossible without understanding it fully, but as a planetary monitoring system. We could use it to track and prevent unauthorized excavations while simultaneously studying its true purpose. Sufar's expression was skeptical. You propose using technology we barely understand that has lain dormant for millennia. Not immediately, and not without extensive research, Elian clarified. But yes, eventually. The alternative is watching corporations like GRE ransack the planet piece by piece, destroying what they don't understand in search of profit. Sarella was already considering the implications. The reformist factions would support this approach. The traditionalists would resist, but perhaps less so, if it were framed as protection rather than innovation. It would require unprecedented cooperation, Dr. Venturi noted. Not just among Karu clans, but between the Karu and outside specialists. A project of this scale would need expertise from multiple disciplines. Then that's what we'll build, Elian said with growing conviction. Not just an archaeological institute, but a true collaborative effort, a unity initiative that brings together the best minds from Karu society and the wider galaxy. As the red sun began to set over the desert, casting long shadows across the ancient tomb, and the modern intruders now being escorted from the site, the seed of a new vision took root. What had begun as a crisis, the threat of technological exploitation, was transforming into an opportunity for something unprecedented, a genuine partnership between a re-emerging civilization and the wider galactic community. The journey back to Karua was filled with intense discussion as they refined the concept of what would eventually become the Unity Initiative. By the time they reached the underground city, a preliminary framework had taken shape, a multidisciplinary approach that would combine archaeological research, technological development, cultural preservation, and planetary security. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The Council of Clans debated the proposal for 3 full days before granting conditional approval. GRE and several other corporations filed formal protests with the Galactic Development Authority, claiming infringement of their exploration rights. But Dr. Venturi's diplomatic connections helped ensure these objections were ultimately dismissed. Funding was secured through a combination of Karu resources and grants from academic and scientific institutions across the galaxy. Teams of specialists began arriving on Eridax: archaeologists, engineers, cultural anthropologists, energy systems experts, and others, all carefully vetted and bound by strict ethical protocols, developed jointly by Karu elders and galactic professional associations. 5 months after the confrontation at the Sacred Tombs, Elian stood on a platform overlooking the central chamber of what had once been the tomb where he'd found the Rod of Unity. The site had been transformed, the crude excavation damage repaired, and the chamber expanded with careful attention to preserving its original architectural integrity. Now, it housed the first prototype of a new monitoring network designed to detect and track unauthorized incursions anywhere on the planet. "Initial calibration is complete," announced Talon, who had been appointed chief coordinator between Karu traditional knowledge and outside technical expertise. "The system is responding to the reference frequencies derived from the rod." Sirala, who now led the cultural integration aspect of the initiative, nodded with satisfaction. "It's fitting that we begin here where it all started. A full circle of sorts." "Not a circle," Sufar corrected, surprising them with an unexpected philosophical observation. "A spiral. We return to the beginning but at a higher level of understanding." Dr. Venturi, who had extended her stay on Eridax indefinitely to serve as chief liaison with galactic institutions, smiled at the clan lord's insight. "Quite right. The best progress often looks like that, honoring the past while moving forward." Elian watched as the monitoring system activated its displays, showing a real-time map of Eridax, with pulsing points of light, representing the known nodes of the ancient Unity network. Most remained dormant, their secrets still to be uncovered. But this first step represented something profound, not just technological achievement, but a new approach to cultural evolution. "We still don't fully understand what the original network was designed to do," he admitted, voicing the concern that had been with him throughout the project. "We're repurposing technology without comprehending its true nature. Understanding comes through engagement, not just observation." Sirala reminded him, echoing a Karu philosophical principle she had taught him years earlier. "We learn by doing, by interacting, by allowing ourselves to be changed by what we study. And we proceed with caution and respect," added Sufar, "unlike those who would simply extract and exploit." As the system completed its initialization sequence, a soft hum filled the chamber, a sound that seemed to resonate, not just with the equipment, but with the very stones around them. For a moment, Elian felt a sensation similar to what he had experienced when first holding the Rod of Unity, a connection to something larger than himself, a sense of purpose that transcended individual achievement. In that moment, he understood something that had eluded him since his first accidental discovery. The Rod of Unity, and by extension the entire network it had once been part of, wasn't just a technological artifact or a symbol of authority. It was a manifestation of a philosophy, a way of being that the ancient Karu had developed, and that their descendants were now rediscovering, the understanding that true progress comes not from dominance, but from connection, not from extraction, but from integration. 2 years later, as the sun set over a transformed Eridax, Elian stood on the observation platform of what had become the Central Unity Complex, a sprawling facility that combined elements of traditional Karu architecture with modern galactic design principles. The facility straddled the surface and subterranean worlds, serving as both a practical headquarters for the initiative and a symbolic bridge between past and future. The Unity Initiative had expanded far beyond its original conception. What had begun as a defensive measure against corporate exploitation had evolved into a comprehensive program for sustainable development, cultural preservation, and technological innovation. The ancient Unity network, once feared as a potential weapon, was gradually being revealed as something far more profound, a planet-wide system designed to maintain environmental balance and facilitate non-hierarchical governance. The 15th node is online, reported Talon. Now Dr. Talon, following completion of a joint degree program established between Karu Traditional Education Systems and the Galactic Science Academy. The southern continent is now fully covered by the monitoring grid. Elian nodded, studying the holographic display that showed the growing network. Each activated node represented months of careful excavation research and integration work, a collaboration between Karu knowledge keepers and specialists from across the galaxy. Any unauthorized activity detected? Elian asked, though he already knew the answer. The days of corporate raids had largely ended once the extent and effectiveness of the monitoring system became known. None in the past 3 months, Talon confirmed. The last attempt was that independent salvage operation near the eastern coastal ruins, and they withdrew as soon as the warning protocols activated. Sarala joined them, accompanied by a delegation of Karu youth students, in the newly established cultural integration program that she had developed. The young Karu represented a new generation, one that had grown up with the knowledge that their civilization was not isolated, but connected to a wider galactic community. The students have a presentation prepared on the historical context of the network node you'll be activating tomorrow, Sarala explained. They've combined traditional knowledge with the new archaeological findings in a rather innovative way. As the students began their presentation, a sophisticated multimedia experience that wove together ancient Karu oral traditions with holographic reconstructions based on the latest research, Elian felt a profound sense of satisfaction. This was the true achievement of the past 4 years, not just the technological recovery or the archaeological discoveries, but the creation of a framework for cultural exchange that respected both tradition and innovation. Sufar arrived midway through the presentation, listening with evident approval. The clan lord had undergone his own transformation over the years, from skeptical traditionalist to one of the most effective advocates for measured, thoughtful integration with the wider galaxy. His influence had been crucial in maintaining support among the more conservative Karu clans. The Council has unanimously approved the expansion of the Surface Restoration Project, he announced, once the students had completed their presentation. The environmental engineering teams can begin work on the northwestern quadrant next month. This was significant news. The Surface Restoration Project, an application of recovered Karu environmental technology, combined with modern terraforming techniques, was gradually reclaiming portions of Eridax from the harsh desert conditions that had dominated since the cataclysm. Small areas were being transformed into habitable zones with sustainable ecosystems, allowing for the first permanent surface settlements since ancient times. That's the third unanimous vote this year, Elian noted, impressed. The traditionalist factions have come a long way. They have seen the results with their own eyes, Sufar replied simply. Theory can be debated endlessly, results cannot. As night fell over the complex, the various teams dispersed to their respective duties. The Unity Initiative operated continuously, with teams of Karu and off-world specialists working in shifts to maintain the monitoring network, continue research into newly discovered nodes, and integrate findings into practical applications. Elian found himself alone on the observation deck, watching as the stars emerged in the clear desert sky. Eridax's atmosphere had begun showing measurable improvements in the regions where the restoration project was active, another unexpected benefit of reactivating portions of the ancient Unity network. Still processing it all, came Dr. Venturi's voice as she joined him at the railing. Every day, Elian admitted with a smile. When I landed on this planet 4 years ago, I was looking for professional recognition for a discovery that would put my name in the textbooks. I never imagined," he gestured at the sprawling complex below them, "that you'd help revitalize an entire civilization," Dr. Venturi suggested. "Or that you'd create a new model for cultural integration that's being studied across the galaxy." "Either. Both." Elian shook his head. "I was so focused on the past that I never considered I might be helping to shape the future." "The best archaeologists always do," she replied. "They just don't always get to see the results so directly." In the distance, the lights of New Karua, the first permanent surface settlement, glowed softly against the desert darkness. Built using a combination of recovered Karoo architectural principles and modern environmental sustainability practices, it represented the physical manifestation of the philosophy that had guided the Unity Initiative from the beginning, honoring the past while embracing the future. The Rod of Unity remained in its ceremonial chamber, deep within Karua, still studied, but never exploited. Over time, its significance had evolved in the minds of both the Karoo and the researchers who worked with them. What had once been seen as a weapon, then as a tool of governance, was now understood as something far more subtle and profound. A tangible reminder that true power lies not in domination, but in connection. As Elian reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment, he remembered the whispered words that had changed everything on that fateful day 4 years ago. "You returned." He hadn't understood then what the warriors meant. He wasn't returning. He was discovering something new. But perhaps in a deeper sense they had been right. Perhaps what he and all those involved in the Unity Initiative were doing was helping to return something essential that had been lost not just to the Karoo, but to all thinking beings who sought to connect rather than conquer, to understand rather than exploit. The metal rod that he had initially dismissed as just a stick had proven to be far more. It had been the key to unlocking not just an ancient technology, but a philosophy, an approach to existence that transcended cultural boundaries and offered a path forward in a galaxy too often defined by competition rather than cooperation. And in that realization, Elian found a peace he had never expected when he first set foot on the red sands of Eridax. He had come seeking professional recognition, but had found purpose instead. He had come to study the past, but had helped shape the future. He had come alone, but had discovered connection. As the stars continued their ancient dance above the desert planet, Elian understood that the greatest discoveries are rarely what we expect them to be when we begin our search. Sometimes, they're not things at all, but realizations, moments of clarity that transform not just our understanding of the world around us, but our place within it. And sometimes the most valuable discoveries are the ones that discover us in return.